Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on which part of the world you're in. My name is Hilario Triago. I will be your moderator for today's webinar entitled Insurers Are from Venus and Insurtechs Are from Mars. So for the next hour, we should be talking about this interesting topic, and it's all about how the insurance industry is entering this age of disruption and digital transformation, looking to serve a more demanding customer than ever before, a more knowledgeable customer as well. And so this webinar will aim to reveal, through a conversation with Steven Zuanella and Jonathan Valentine, how is it that the industry is going to change to address those challenges and equally those opportunities. We shall be listening from Steve, who will introduce himself in a minute or two, who's the Chief Digital Officer of RSA Insurance Group, and we'll also hear from the startup side of things from Jonathan, who's the CTO for ThinkCo. So it shall be an interesting hour or so, and we look forward to your questions as well, so we get the conversation going. So why don't we kick off with some introductions, Steve, and you start.
Okay, thanks, Hilario. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. As Hilario mentioned, my name is Steven Zuanella. I'm the Group Chief Digital Officer for RSA Insurance, a UK-based but global insurer. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the part of the Venus piece in which I find myself being in the legacy and existing organization of insurance type business. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about where I think we are today as legacy insurers and what we're doing also to move our business model forward and to look at the opportunities that digital allows us and our customers to serve them better and to have a better business mix as well. In terms of where we are as a business, we don't start with the biggest advantage in terms of digital. So actually, being very candid, the customers' needs are being driven by other organizations and other sectors, not insurance, but they are coming through to insurance now, and they are starting to really make a difference in terms of where we're at. So how can we, as incumbents, take on board some of the startup philosophy and advantage and limitations I'm sure Jonathan will talk about in his opening statement, to make sure our business is more streamlined, more effective, more agile, faster, and more customer-centric. And I would just put on the table that for me, there's some real advantages for us as incumbents to, yes, hang on to our brand, hang on to our strengths, hang on to our experience and underwriting and all the other experience and strengths we have, but also to embrace the speed, agility, customer focus and innovation piece that some of those startups allow us to embrace more openly. There are some limitations to what we as incumbents can do, and some of that is, and this is unique to the incumbents, is that the scale piece for us and the legacy piece for us is a big obstacle, and it's going to take some time to get through that. We're confident we can, but it's an extra thing that the startups don't have to deal with or worry about right now. In terms of how we're embracing change at RSA, we're looking at other sectors all the time in terms of what's happening in retail, in transport, and we're actually starting to change how we work as a business. And the first thing I'd say on embracing change is that always starts with people and with ways of working. And we're looking at how do we drive our business forward and keep our customers happy and exceed their expectations in a different way. And so we're introducing agile ways of working across the business. And by agile, I don't just mean the methodology, I mean generally agile as a business. We're starting to look at flexible IT in terms of how do we stop trying to build everything and actually help ourselves to what is available already in the cloud. We're starting to do some sort of outside-in thinking around new propositions. And also we're trying to reduce the silos in the organizations, because as with any existing organization, there are plenty of silos that stop us from working more collaboratively together. And I see three key trends in terms of where that will take us. Firstly, it'll increase investments in data analytics, AI, and blockchain. I know some of those are fashionable words, but there is more substance behind the words. I think some of those longer transformational deals are going to be replaced by shorter and agile ones. So how we do business and how we do programs will change dramatically. And I think there's a chance for new revenue streams as well, in terms of how we as a business grow and how we remain profitable, and how we also keep control over costs. In terms of some of the examples of what we're doing, we're working with a number of startups here in the UK and globally. Some of the examples are on telematics, a company called Track Global, Meekbot, PitPat, the Hood Group. We are looking at how we can take the best of those startup philosophies and incorporate them into our customer propositions. And finally, a quick note on the future for me. Will insurance ever be the same again? The answer is probably no. But the timescale at which this will change will not be as rapid as some expect, in my view. But it will change the industry forever. And we can talk a little bit more about how I think that will happen once Jonathan's done his introduction as well. So that's it for me, Hilario. Back to you.
No, that's a great introduction. Thank you for all that. Plenty of things to pick up later in the conversation. So let's go to Jonathan. Go for your introduction, Jonathan.
Hi everyone, I'm Jonathan Valentine and I'm CTO at a company called Thinko, probably a company you've probably never heard of. We've only been going since January. Before that, I was head of innovation at Insurtech, one of the founding members of staff. So I'm a bit different to Stephen. I'm in the ship at the moment going from Venus to Mars. So I've been part of an insurer. And even though it was a relatively new insurer, it still felt legacy to me compared to where we're going now and what's available. So for me, I could see a massive difference straight away in the time that we've been going, of even how, as a Insurtech with no customers and no legacy to worry about, how different things are. When we set up the insurance company 9 years ago, I believe it was, in 2009, we didn't want to be a tech company. We wanted to be a insurance company that did telematics for motor. But unfortunately, due to the cloud being a very new thing and the way that everything was back then, you had to become a tech company. You had to build your own telematics platform. You had to build all of your infrastructure. So it meant that you end up becoming a master of a server room and buildings that you didn't actually want to support. Whereas now at Thinko, we're starting to, we don't have servers. That's our number one thing straight away. So we're utilizing not only the cloud, but the specialities that are now coming from using the likes of Amazon, AWS, in the fact that I don't even have to have a server anymore. I can just give them my code and say, when this happens, do this for me. And they charge me for all that time running that code. So it means as a company, our IT model is totally different to a typical insurer, because we don't, it's linear. So we can do for example, per trip, per event. So just in case, for anyone who isn't aware, Thinko, what we're doing is we're developing a telematics ecosystem using the next generation of telematics. So using a device that we've been working with another startup, an American-based startup, that uses the likes of ADAS, so advanced driver assistance systems. So that when a customer is driving and they've got this box in their car, it'll alert them if they're getting too close to the car in front, if they indicate out of their lane if they pull out of their lane without indicating. So we're building this entire ecosystem around it that's customer centric, and we're taking advantage of GDPR. Another thing that, again, if you compare the insurers and the Insurtech, we don't have to worry about 4 different legacy systems. We are able to develop for GDPR without any worries, because we have no data, so we can build for it. And that's a massive thing, this GDPR, when it comes to, if you look at an incumbent insurer, they may have 7, 8 more platforms that maybe haven't been touched for years. There's only a couple of people that know the platforms, and now they've got, for the end of May, they've got to be able to have their audits done and everything like that. So the GDPR for us, moving from all of the GDPR plans that you see in the insurance side, now as part of an Insurtech, it's totally different. The fact that we can actually build to speed straight away, as in you have to sign off at an insurance company, it takes, maybe you do 1 deployment a month, but we're looking to be doing several deployments a day. We can actually build a platform that is a lot more quicker in terms of serving customers, serving our partners, serving our own needs, without having to worry about, will the system support it? Do we need to go see our compliance department? There is such massive differences. So in terms of for us, we're obviously we're working with insurers. We're from the other side, so we're now in Insurtech working with insurance partners rather than vice versa. And so for us, luckily, because we've got this experience of being an insurer, we know what it is that insurers need, but it's a lot slower. And so it's for us, it's how we can do as much as possible to make it easy for an insurance company to be able to come on board without having to do a lot of legwork themselves, which we know they're unable to do.
Interesting. So let me then introduce myself for the audience and for you guys. So if Stephen is in Venus and Jonathan, you're going from Venus to Mars. I'm actually doing round trips at the moment as CEO of Bullfrog. Bullfrog is a Insurtech delivery organization. I founded Bullfrog back at the end of 2016. Coming on the back of being the CEO for RSA Insurance in Latin America. We sold that business back in 2016, and then I decided to jump into this gap that we perceived was in the market in terms of connecting startups or Insurtech startups with the incumbents of the industry and finding ways to make sure that these guys found collaboration in order to really develop the ecosystem and get a better industry for us all. So we started that, and then clearly what you both are saying your focus is at the moment is, in many ways quite gratifying, because it means that 2 years later, what we started from Miami, along with many other organizations, is actually something that's happening, internationally, and you can only feel good about that. Now, clearly. And this is where I think the conversation is going to start to get interesting, is to when we double click on how the incumbents are actually using startups or working with startups to develop their capabilities and be more agile, Stephen, as you said, etc. And Jonathan, you mentioned, teaming up and being part of your business model, that you actually partner with this incumbents to drive the agenda, and the capabilities that you develop forward. The key question I like to start with then is, in practice, and maybe Steve, you can kick us off on this. In practice, within your digital transformation agenda within a FTSE 100 organization, how do you actually interact with these startups that are bringing capability and agility to your portfolio? How does that happen in real life? Take us through, a day in the life of that interaction between your team and the startups.
Okay. So the first thing that we have to do is to actually understand who these startups are and what they do, and that in itself is a fairly significant task because of the sheer volume of players out there. And so part of my role is to constantly scan the market, get out there to speak to Insurtechs and innovators, see what examples are coming out from partnerships with other insurers, getting on board with some of the sort of Insurtech London, Momentum London, and sort of startup bootcamp type activities. So first of all, it's just getting to know these people, because there are so many of them. The second thing is actually, as Jonathan mentioned, sort of Venus and Mars speak a different language. And so Venus will speak the language of traditional business, which is profitability and efficiency and customer, whereas what we find with the Insurtechs is they're much more about right out there in terms of completely revolutionizing the business model, much more open to taking risk, of course they would be, and also much more open to doing things in a much faster way that maybe circumvent some of the existing processes that exist within the incumbent. So that makes for an interesting type of conversation when we are trying to solve problems together and when we are trying to take the business forward, because the approach that RSA would traditionally take will be very different to the approach that our Insurtech partners would normally take. It's probably no surprise to hear that we've had quite a few interesting conversations back and forth between the different parties to find a right way forward. And I think the key thing for me is that both parties, in my experience, are learning from each other. And that means that each time we interact with our Insurtech startups, we're making a step forward in the right direction. So it may be slow, may be painful for the startup sometimes, but it's a step forward. And vice versa, I think the Insurtech startup that we work with appreciate the knowledge, experience that they get from working with someone like RSA or any other large insurer. So that's pretty much how we work together. And then obviously there's the implementation, which I won't go into in detail, but those levels of interaction happen at every level of the organization, whether it's from the CEO of the startup right down to the guys on the ground and small teams that help us do what we need to do.
Got it. Jonathan, I think Stephen touched on something very, very interesting just now, which is, the incumbents are or have a heavy focus on profitability. They have a large exposure to the market, and profitability is ultimately, the name of the game. How do you ensure that your technology, your solution, actually becomes an Insurtech solution in the sense of a monetized or value add model, as opposed to just being an addition to the expense line of the incumbents, which, as Stephen said earlier, and you as well, already have quite a lot of legacy systems to pay for, and you don't really want to actually be in the same spot from a cost perspective. How do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, on the profitability side of things, I think Insurtech too should be thinking about their own profitability and building a product that actually not only insurers or any partner wants, but they can make money off. There's this whole thing, obviously, some companies build just to get investment and build to bring in as much money as possible. But for your business to survive, you need as little investment as possible, and you need to get going and be self-sufficient as quickly as possible, and to be profitable yourself, so you can offer a good service to your partners, insurers, without worrying about where's my next hit of money going to come from, because we're losing all this money. Going to your question of actually building a product that actually people want. Well, for us, it all comes down to the customer. Now, if the customer, for us, that can either be the insurer or it can be the actual insurer's customer. Now, you need to build something that benefits, hopefully, both parties, whether that be helping a customer get their claim resolved quicker, so in which case both insurer and customer are happy, or building a process that can actually help your insurance customer a lot quicker, maybe with a process management or workflow or something like that. But for us, it's about actually working with the insurance partners. Now, we're at a bit of advantage. I go to a lot of these tech events, whether it be here or America, and you see a lot of people come from the tech industry into insurance, and they've built a product and it's great, but they've totally forgot the fact that if for an insurance company, they're compliant. It takes 2 months to get a document signed off. There's not a chance in hell you're going to be able to put something on their website and integrate into their portal systems and all their documents within a couple of months. So for us, it's about doing as much as possible upfront with the insurer and building a product that allows them to see the benefit of it without having to do much work in the first place, whether that be a proof of concept, taking as much legwork out of it so they can actually see the benefit, see what the actual value add for them is, and then again build, whether it be use of APIs or integration tools, building it in a way that the insurance company can, without having to invest a lot of money, because there's no good having a great service if it takes a year to implement, because no insurance company has a year's worth of IT resource or the time to do that, because by the time that year's up, their priorities may have changed, that product may have been discontinued. You need to do as much as possible to make it streamlined for an insurance company to go on board. Otherwise, your product's pointless. You can have the best product in the world, but if it relies on them committing a year's worth of IT to integrate into their document system, it's a useless product, really.
Yeah, I hear you, and you're absolutely right. I think, at the end of the day, you need to understand how the industry operates. What are the challenges that they face, and therefore, what is the best way to help leaders like Stephen on the inside to really get a product and a solution that's as ready to go forward and move through the processes as they intend to actually have a better time to market. So Stephen, have you seen that level of, let's call it, maturity in their thinking from all the startups you operate with, or do you find yourself having to also do a bit of work in terms of bringing those guys' mindset into your world and the realities that you need to deal with so that they can actually help you have a differentiated capability, as fast as you can actually have it?
So I think the answer is yes, we do have to do a lot of work with our partners, because expectations of how fast we can do things at, and expectations of how far we can go and what risks can be taken, they're not aligned when we start. Particularly depends on the individual organization as well. If it's been around for a bit longer, then they've a bit more experience of insurance companies. They've probably been working with us for quite some time. But we have to make sure that that we understand each other, and it is a bit like the Venus and the Mars thing. We talk separate languages in some cases, and so it's important for us to really communicate how we do things, and they can understand how that works, and then obviously they can apply their brilliance and their new ways of working and their new technologies and their new cultures and products to our organization. Bearing in mind, as Jonathan said, these things don't happen overnight, as they probably would if you were just working with another startup. So we do have those differences in culture, and I think there'll be more of those differences as we grow together. There'll be growing pains as well, as we suddenly realize that something we hadn't thought about needs to be fixed, and that affects the relationship between the two of us. And I think as a happily married couple, as we age together, I suspect we'll get closer and closer in terms of the ways of working, and by the end of it, we'll be much more aligned. But it will take lots of time and lots of effort, and there will be failure. And failure, by the way, is fine as long as we learn from it and we move on.
Yeah, absolutely. So you just touched on the relationship side of things, and I'm wondering, in the markets you guys operate, and whomever wants to kick off with the answer, but in the markets that you guys operate, where is it that you've seen the most developed, for want of a better word, ecosystem whereby incumbents and startups are actually collaborating the most, jointly developing the market, jointly, sort of recognizing each other capabilities and how they help both parties, and therefore brand development, etc., etc. Have you seen that more so in the UK market by virtue that the insurance industry is more mature there, or have you seen it in other places? Jonathan, let's start with you.
I don't think we're at a point. You've obviously got Insurtechs are growing all the time, and you see the likes of these new, with the FCA sandbox, where they're helping actually startups work with insurance companies. But I think if you look at the US in terms of one that seems to be hitting the news constantly, the Lemonade model, and obviously now the ability for them to integrate outside of insurance, and the ability for their API to, when you go to buy a bicycle, it'll now offer you can get the Lemonade insurance right there and then as part of that product. So for me, in the UK, I'm not sure we're fully there yet. I think we're getting there, but I don't think there's enough big players in the insurtech market because it's still new. It's maybe bigger in the US currently, but in terms of the UK, I don't think there's any great examples that stand out to me right now, in terms of where the brand of the insurtech has grown as much as insurance. Now, in the back end, maybe there may be examples, but in terms of where the insurtech's getting public recognition to, at the moment, there's nothing that I think, wow, that's amazing. But I probably totally forgotten, and you're going to prove me wrong in a minute.
Stephen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm not going to prove you wrong, Jonathan. Don't worry. So I agree. Pretty much. I mean, Lemonade is a bit of the poster child, and it's a bit like the Amazon of the insurance tech revolution. So let's see how that one evolves. But I think actually take away Lemonade, there's a scattering of ecosystems out there that are getting traction, but none that have got real traction. And we've seen in the UK, so we see, by the way, pockets of innovation and insurtechs right across our markets. I'd probably say the UK and Scandinavia are two of our biggest pockets of innovation, and then Canada and the US also. But in the UK, the biggest area we've applied it to is telematics, and the reason that is is because there's lots of innovation going on out there, but where we see we can make a difference to our business and our customers in a relatively shorter term, then we tend to go for those opportunities. So telematics is one area where we've made a lot of progress in the UK and are making progress in other markets across the world with third parties and Insurtechs. And then also data pricing and underwriting, which is really the nub of our business, and it's what we do, and it's what we need to be best at in order to achieve our best-in-class strategy. And we're also working with a number of Insurtechs out there to make that core to our core proposition and business. But I agree with Jonathan. There's no real sort of poster child out there other than Lemonade that I could nominate as a business. They just support our business mainly.
Yeah. So an interesting approach I can share with the audience and you guys that it's being taken now in a much smaller and less mature, but nonetheless, riding the Insurtech wave is Latin America, because some big players are making the decision of partnering with some startups, and they really take out a particular product, a very different, unique product that they just basically said powered by, and they just give the startup the space to show that they are the ones kind of behind, or the engine behind the product that they're launching. But they're very small attempts to do that, and we'll see whether that actually is a vehicle that may to take. But that's something that I've seen, and curious to see your thoughts around that as well. But I agree with everything you guys said. So
hopefully, on the next time we talk, we'll be talking about Thinko as the poster child.
Yeah, that'll be great. Why not? Why not? And this webinar was the kickoff of that. Hey,
exactly. And we can say the success came from this webinar.
There you go. There you go. We'll I think Stephen and I will line up for some equity then, given our involvement.
Absolutely, I'll get my share. Thank you.
Yeah, sounds good.
Excellent. Guys, what if we just jump into some of the audience questions? I think we're starting to get some of those, and it's worth talking about them. For Stephen, how do you view digital talent in the insurance sector? Where is it likely to come from, and how will this develop? Is the industry suitable, supplied with the next generation of talent to continue the digitalization journey?
That's a great question. Whoever asked it, and it's something that we are grappling with every day as a business, across all our businesses, in fact. And I think the truth is, from my perspective, is that we have to work extra hard to attract, develop, and retain the best and brightest talent in digital. And the fact of the matter is, there isn't enough of that talent around, so it's a scarce resource, and we have to fight hard for it. Our attrition rate for holding on to people is average, so it's not better or worse than anybody else, as far as I can see. But there's just not enough resources out there, and we have to make this a slightly better or different working environment for them to thrive in, to keep them long term. And by the way, this is still the beginning of the game in insurance. There's so much more to go for yet, that we need to build that capability. But for every role that we are trying to find, there are numerous other insurance companies and non-insurance companies competing for that talent. And we don't have the kudos of the Googles and Amazons and Apples. But actually, when you get into the if you break down the insurance industry and what it does and the purpose it serves and how we make it work with customers, actually we find that people really do enjoy that. But it's a question of getting beyond that initial, oh, it's insurance, and then going into, right, okay, this is how we change the world piece by piece. So it's a live challenge for us, Mario, and we are dealing with it day by day. But it's not going to be an easy one. It won't get any easier either.
I'm sure.
I have to agree with you on that one. It's something that even when we were at Shorterbox, we found as well, where as soon as you put insurance into the job description, even if you use the word telematics and go, we use driving data and something like that, once people expect to always be doing the exciting stuff with the telematics data, but actually policy administration systems, dealing with platforms that actually they may never use ever again, you really struggle to keep developers engaged, because policy administration systems for insurance, they may never use it again because they may go to a development company or an agency. So it's really for them, if they see it on their CV, it's quite a useless skill because they've either got to go to another insurance company who lives in their town or city who uses the same policy administration platform as you, or it's a waste of 2 years or something, or 3 years developing a skill that actually they're never going to need again. And so that you don't get the engagement that you really want because it's not exciting.
Yeah, I remember my days as COO back in one of the countries, and I remember one of the big challenges was the IT department has a talent war with any industry, whereas the underwriting or technical department in an insurance company typically have talent wars with other insurance companies mainly. So the techies, if you will, are always in a bit of a challenge to be attracted and to be retained by virtue of the fact that they have to fight with banks and other tech companies that actually want the talent. Now, Stephen, you mentioned something quite interesting that I want to actually double click on, and on the same topic of talent. What about the change management aspect within the organization? For example, within RSA, you're implementing new capabilities. They're implemented with a partner startup. You change many of the internal processes that have been there for years, and you're affecting people that have been executing those processes. How is it that you go about managing that change for those people internally, so as to whether they change roles and move to contribute somewhere else? How do you make that journey viable internally so the disruption is not something that really makes the organizational design dysfunctional?
Okay, let me give this one a go. I'll see if I can answer that. I think one of the things that RSA is very clear on its journey to best in class is that change will become part of anyone's job, and therefore the fear of working in a different way shouldn't get in the way. And I think that is communicated very clearly, actually, across all our markets to our people. In terms of the personal element of that, I think there is a recognition. Actually, it's a double-sided discussion, because if you work in the new way with people that culturally find that more difficult, then that's a challenge for those individuals. But equally, if you don't innovate and don't work in the new way, your younger generation or the developers or your Insurtech partners will also not be very happy. So it's managing both sides of that equation to make sure that we deliver for our customers at the same time as evolving the culture of the organization. And I think my personal view on this is that it's not a big bang. It's a slow deliver in a different way, show the results, show the people that deliver the results that they can be done in a different way, and then either give them opportunities to thrive in that or allow them to move on elsewhere in the organization. Because RSA is a large organization. There is need for lots of skill sets right across the business. There's always room for an extra person in specific areas if they want to move. But for me, it's a slow journey to achieve this, and also to try and keep the balance between that different way of working, both culturally more native to insurance and totally different and much more native to Insurtech, which is very, very different.
That's an excellent point. You're quite right. It's a two-way street, and an organization such as yours that have been around for so many years, has the capability to really reinvent itself, and so should the people that work at the organization at this particular point in time. Jonathan, let me go for a question from the audience to you. Insurtech live or die in the early phases of their business life and need insurers to buy in to their technology quickly. How have ThinkCo nurtured relationships and gained favor with the incumbents?
Okay, so for us, you're totally right. You've got a certain window before you have to find more money or you die. So for us, we're actually focusing as well as building our B2B, working with insurers on a proposition. We're actually developing a proposition that allows us to work directly with self-directly to consumers, whether that be through normal marketing channels of TV, radio, whether it be Facebook, so that we're in control of our own destiny, so that we don't have to rely on insurers for our revenue stream, because we know that it will take time for insurers to get on board. So we've come up with a plan on how to deal with insurers in terms of their timelines not matching our own. But in order to counteract that, let's create a proposition using our technology, using our ecosystem, using our knowledge that actually a consumer will want to buy themselves. And then off the back of that, we can use that relationship to maybe get them in with an insurer or to sell them an insurance service later on. But the most important thing, obviously, is getting revenue in as a business. The smaller your losses are in your first year, the better. We're at an advantage over a lot of Insurtechs in the fact that we're self-funded right now. So we're not going out looking for investment. So we can spend our time actually developing our proposition, developing our platform, and actually doing the important things rather than running around banks. Because insurance companies will take time. So while we're working on our B2C proposition, which we're also actually developing what we call our proof of concepts. So finding a way that we can engage with the insurance companies, actually help them understand what it is we're doing and how it is telematics can help them, and actually building a product that they can trial without any IT resource, without any integration with their live customers, yet also helps us because it will bring in revenue, kind of like a consultancy service for a one-off fee. And then off the back of that, once you've engaged these insurers and they can understand the benefits and they understand the value both for them and their customers, you can look to work together at a timeline in order to integrate that with their live customers. But obviously that takes time. So for us, in order to not die, we're looking at building a consumer-facing product at the same time.
Interesting. And let me go for another question that I think is going to be for both of you, and it's an interesting topic to go for next, which is when you find a new partner, that clearly gives you a competitive advantage. How do you deal with exclusivity? I guess from your angle, straight as I've just mentioned, Stephen, but I guess from your other angle, Jonathan, what about incumbents that have looked at you and say, what, I don't want you as a partner. I'll for a generic customer relationship, I want to have some exclusivity. How do each of you deal with that? Stephen, let's start with you.
So the way we look at this is obviously finding out first what is compelling, because what's compelling to us is probably going to be compelling for other insurers as well. And sometimes we find things that are good but not compelling, and therefore that the debate doesn't come in around exclusivity. Where we do invest or give a startup an opportunity to come and work with us, we do sometimes request exclusivity. We tend to make that temporary so that it gives the business enough time to leverage the benefit of that competitive advantage, that it then can then be released later on in the marketplace more generally. And what we're trying to avoid is basically becoming so involved with the Insurtech that either they rely totally on us or we own them in the end. So we want to make sure we give that a fair shot. In this marketplace, we believe that copying solutions is relatively easy, depending on the solution itself. So actually insisting on exclusivity for too long, I don't think serves a great purpose, but we do that for the short term.
And I guess to add to that, if you're thinking of an exclusivity in the long term, you may as well just think of acquisition, because what's the point of getting such exclusivity if the technology or the proposition is so compelling? You may as well just make it yours and gain the competitive advantage right from the start. Interesting. Jonathan, what about you from the other perspective?
Exclusivity isn't a bad thing. I think whether you're an insurer or an Insurtech, you want partners that you can work with and trust. And one way to show trust in a partner is an exclusivity deal. Now, obviously, no one wants to be tied in forever because things change, people change, what the offerings change. So I'm with Stephen on this one. I think they're a good thing, but I don't think you can be tied in too long, because otherwise, you're right, you end up restricting yourself from the rest of the market for forever, in which case no one can come to you, or you end up in a position where you're essentially owned by one company, which you don't want either. So I have to agree with what Stephen said.
Good. Let me move on to given that we're in such a global world, and irrespective of the scope of each of your companies, in terms of the innovation sourcing, the scouting, where do you get those capabilities from? Where are those startups that you collaborate with or work with? Are they from all over the world, or are they particularly tend to be more from your neck of the woods?
I think they're everywhere, aren't they? I think I was on a call this morning with South Korea and then Chicago. So you kind of, I think we've gone global. I think people don't just go to conferences in their local anymore. I'm going to a conference in America next month. You've got the LA car show, which is obviously moving towards the more auto tech side, and has more and more Insurtech partners there. I think you go wherever the good people are, really. I don't think there's no point being restricted to just people in your neck of the woods anymore.
I agree. How about you, Stephen?
So I think what tends to happen with our businesses is that we have contacts with all the startup sort of programs and entities in the markets that we serve. But I think there is just to build on what Jonathan said there, it is a global world out there, but the relationships that we build, for some reason, tend to be stronger in our home markets. So, for example, London, Stockholm, Toronto are probably the markets that we have most participation, stroke understanding of in terms of innovation and startups. Much less, for example, as you mentioned, of South America or even some of the Asian countries. So we have some work to do on that.
I think it's an interesting point. The reason I asked for it, I think it varies. First of all, I both agree with you. It's a global world, and opportunities can come from anywhere. Having said that, though, there are clearly organizations that are more prepared to operate in that global world and be able to be from, let's say, South Korea and go and work with a company in London, because the team, it's international in experience. They know how to operate themselves internationally and with incumbents in the UK market, and that's an advantage. There are others who unfortunately are very local, despite the fact that their product might be very international and easy to implement, but unfortunately, they just don't have that capability to relate themselves internationally with people from other cultures and take it outside of their local markets. And that's something that we've seen that's very interesting. The difference between aspiring to and actually being able to deliver on that aspiration is something that's limiting, many companies out there, whether they're Insurtech startups or incumbents. But good to have your points of view. Let me move on to another quick question before we start to wrap up things, as we're 3/4 of the hour in. English is my second language, so bear with me on this word. Operationalizing new tech is a big issue for insurers. Does Steve agree? Do you agree, Stephen? Which other individuals and departments assist in bringing that operational capability in-house?
Yeah, so the operationalizing, if I can pronounce it, is a big challenge for us, because as we've talked about already, we've been around for 300 plus years. We've grown through acquisition. We have multiple legacies and different ways of working. And so an example of an idea that will work as a standalone won't necessarily work when you try and scale it up or industrialize it or operationalize it. And so that's one of the biggest challenges, actually, of how we make change happen in RSA, because we can always go into a garage or do something outside the organization as a test and as an MVP, and we do that frequently. But the real benefit to the organization comes as it affects the operating model of the organization, and that is when you attack the beast that is the existing business, as well as just looking at the future. And so we spend a lot of time on this. We're not perfect by any means. I don't think any insurer is, we have a lot of work to do in terms of transforming, operationalizing that innovation and Insurtech in our businesses. But there are also some good examples of progress where we have managed to bite the bullet of scaling, and it takes a little bit longer than we would have hoped. But actually, we get there, and that's great for our customers and great for our business. So it's something that will not go away in the short term. We'll be focusing on it for some time yet. And any help that people have out there, by all means, let me know. We'll be open to any solutions.
You'll be getting a few messages from LinkedIn, I'm sure. Jonathan, what about you? What are the characteristics of people who are able to make operational changes fast? How do they look like? What do they do?
I'm not sure I can give you the answer to that. All I know is that we, in my past life, we developed a very, very good bit of kit that actually helped a handler in the claims department make their life very easy. So it turned the matrix data, that is telematics data, and all of its associated data into something really, really easy and simple to use when it came to the claim. It told them, should I carry on with this claim, yes or no? Is there anything dodgy? It gave them some really simple answers. And we did all of our initial testing, and there was some great feedback, and we gave 4 people who were testing it for us in the claims department access, and suddenly I found 50 people logged on at once because they all enjoyed it. But then you roll it out and people end up like zombies. They fall back to what they know. And so you try, and even with the people who are engaged, making that operational change and actually getting people to do something new day in, day out. If you give them any leeway to go back to their old routine, they tend to fall back into their old routine. If there's any slight issue with obviously your new tech, which happens with new tech, there's always going to be hiccups. And then once they've gone back to their old routine, they never go back to it again. And so you almost need someone watching it and watching the implementation, and almost their sole job is actually helping the operational rollout and keeping people on track. Because otherwise people just go back to their old way, and then you lose all of the benefits of the new tech, and you end up paying for the new tech, whether that be in terms of your implementation costs or your build costs or your monthly subscription or something like that. But you're not getting the benefit because someone had a hiccup. It's different to what they usually do, so they've gone back to their old way. And so it's hard to keep everyone's eye on the ball because they don't see the full benefit. They don't realize that if everyone in their department does it and we all do this, the benefit is this. They have one slight hiccup and it's, you know what, I'll go back to the old way. I don't want to log into a second website. And so that's why your rollout has to be as smooth for that person as possible. So they don't have to have an extra screen open. They don't have to log into something different, or they don't have to search somewhere else because they can't be bothered. They don't want to. They'll just go back to their old way. And then you've lost all of your benefit that you've invested for the last year, 2 years. Indeed.
Gentlemen, we're getting close to finishing our webinar. Is there anything you'd like to add before I move to the closing?
I think just a couple of points for me, really. I mentioned in my opening, and that this stuff isn't easy. And I think everybody that operates in this space, whether you're on the Insurtech side or on the Venus side, on the incumbent side, knows that. The opportunity is enormous, both for our customers and for our business, and RSA recognizes that. The challenge we've got is to grasp the opportunity in the way that's going to get us the best value, the quickest. And as I said earlier on, this will be an ongoing journey, probably lasting another 10 years at least, and the transformation juggernaut won't stop because by the time we get to one other place, then it'll moved on to somewhere else. So this is a game we're going to have to learn to play much better, but at RSA we're confident that we can do a good job at it. So that's my final argument.
Very good. Jonathan, how about you?
I think we're all heading in the right direction. Insurers, if you told them about putting data, whether it be customer data or driving data in, or anything like that, and you mentioned the cloud a few years ago, you'd have got very worried faces and a referral to the compliance department, who would then say, no, it's much safer that we put this data on our own data warehouse, which is in our basement, and they think that's more secure because they can see the server. Now you're getting people much more open to this, and now that you've got this openness to cloud technology and the ability to work with third parties without worried about the data being hacked or taken straight away, it's allowing a much more sensible conversation between insurers and insurtechs, where actually you don't spend the first 6 months trying to explain to them about cloud technology. You can actually get straight in and actually talking about actually what it is you're trying to do together. Whereas before there was a massive obstacle for Insurtech where insurers couldn't or didn't understand actually this new style of technology in terms of they were only used to legacy. So now they seem much more open for a proper conversation about actually what matters rather than just focusing on the servers or the technology itself.
Excellent, excellent. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time, for your engagement. I think it's been a great kickoff to the webinar series of Insurance Nexus. To the audience, I hope you guys had a good 1 hour of conversation and lots of things to think about and take away. I want to remind you that the same guys that brought you this webinar will bring you others in the future as part of the series, and also will bring the Insurance Customer Engagement Europe Summit in June 19th and 20th in London. You can get more information at events.insurancenexus.com. And again, thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this time. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks.